Once upon a time, in a lovely house with bright yellow walls and colorful pictures, there lived a little pig named Pepa. One morning she woke up in her soft bed with a flowery blanket. The sun was shining through the window, lighting up her whole room. Pepa jumped up happily and ran downstairs. In the living room, the carpet on the floor was soft and green and covered in fun patterns. In the kitchen, Mummy Pig was cooking breakfast. She wore a blue apron, and the smell of pancakes filled the air. Pepa sat at the wooden table. On the table was a big book of letters. It was brand new and had shiny gold edges. At the corner of the room, Daddy Pig sat in his favorite chair. He wore his round glasses and was reading a newspaper. When he saw Pepa, he took off his glasses and said, "Good morning, Pepa. Are you ready to learn?" Pepa nodded excitedly. Daddy Pig put his glasses back on and said, "Today we're going to learn the alphabet. Pepa, can you say alphabet?" "Alphabet," said Pepa, her pink cheeks glowing with excitement. From the corner, a small voice shouted, "G-R." It was Pepa's little brother, George. He was a small piglet, and he wore a blue shirt. He was playing with his favorite dinosaur on the living room floor. Pepa giggled and opened the book to the first page. On the first page was the letter A. Underneath the letter was a colorful picture of an apple. "A is for apple," said Pepa. Outside the window, Pepa could see her garden. It was green and full of bright flowers. A tall tree stood in the middle, and birds sang sweetly from its branches. "That's right, Pepa," said Daddy Pig. "A is for apple." Then Pepa turned the page. On the next page was the letter B. Underneath the letter was a picture of a blue ball in the grass. "B is for ball," said Pepa. George ran to the table. He was holding his toy ball. "B is for ball," shouted George. Everyone laughed. The day went by quickly. Pepa and her family stepped outside into the yard. In the yard stood a big wooden table under a canopy. The sun shone brightly, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves on the trees around the house. "Now let's practice some more," said Daddy Pig. Pepa grabbed some chalk and wrote the letter C on a board. Beside the board, there was a black crow sitting on a branch in the garden. The crow cawed loudly. "C is for crow," said Pepa. George clapped his hands. "Grr, crow," he repeated. When it started to get dark, Pepa's family gathered in the living room again. In the corner, a fireplace glowed warmly. On the wall, happy family photos added splashes of color to the dark wood paneling. Pepa reached the letter D. On the page, there was a picture of a brown dog walking on a path. "D is for dog," said Pepa. "Well done, Pepa," said Daddy Pig. Outside, the stars twinkled in the night sky. The moon shone brightly, bathing the garden in soft silver light. Pepa continued reading. "E is for egg," she said, pointing at the picture of an egg. Daddy Pig smiled and said, "Well done, Pepa." As the evening went on, Pepa learned more letters. When bedtime came, Pepa snuggled into her bed. Her room was dark, but the glow of the moon made the colorful pictures on the walls seem to sparkle. Pepa looked at the alphabet book. Now she knew all the letters from A to F. "I love learning," she whispered. "Tomorrow I'll learn even more letters. I want to know all the letters in the alphabet." The moon glowed through the window, promising a new day. and Peppa dreamed of all the letters and words she would discover. The next morning, Peppa Pig woke up in her sunny room with yellow walls and cheerful pictures everywhere. She slipped on her red dress and dashed downstairs, clutching her alphabet book tightly. George was already in the living room, playing with his dinosaur on the green carpet. The kitchen smelled of fresh toast, and Mummy Pig, in her blue apron, was busy buttering slices at the counter. Peppa opened her book to the letter G and saw a picture of a goat munching grass. "G is for goat," she said, and George shouted, "G-R-R." Daddy Pig lounged in the armchair, sipping tea from a big mug with polka dots, his glasses perched on his nose. He smiled and said, "Let's take the alphabet outside today." Peppa grabbed her chalk and skipped out to the garden, full of excitement. The garden sparkled in the sunlight, with bees buzzing around daisies and a soft wind swaying the tall oak tree. Peppa turned to the letter H and saw a house with a red roof, just like theirs. "H is for house," she exclaimed, pointing at their cozy home. Then the family strolled to the pond behind the house, where ducks paddled and frogs croaked among the reeds. Peppa flipped to I and found an igloo made of snow in the book. "I is for igloo," she said, and Mummy Pig giggled, imagining snow in their yard. By midday, the sun climbed high, casting shadows from the trees onto the grassy lawn near the house. Peppa reached J with a picture of a juicy jam jar on a shelf. "J is for jam," she cheered, and Daddy Pig fetched some strawberry jam from the kitchen. In the afternoon, they sat on the red and blue striped swing in the yard, rocking gently under the warm sun. Peppa opened K and saw a kite soaring in a bright blue sky. "K is for kite," she said, and George ran to grab his toy kite from the shed. As evening fell, the sky turned orange, and fluffy clouds floated over the hills beyond their little town. Peppa turned to L and found a lion roaring proudly in the book. "L is for lion," she declared, and George roared Gerlion right along with her. Before bedtime, the family gathered in the living room, where a lamp cast a warm glow over the bookshelves. Peppa reached M with a monkey swinging on a vine in the picture. "M is for monkey," she said, and Mummy Pig clapped for her clever girl. Peppa climbed into bed, snuggling under her starry blanket as the room darkened around her cozy little space. She whispered, "I'm halfway through the alphabet soon, I'll know it all." Outside, the moon shone brightly, and stars twinkled in the night sky. The following morning, Peppa Pig woke up in her bright room, the yellow walls glowing in the early sunlight. She pulled on her red dress and hurried downstairs, her alphabet book tucked under her arm. George was in the living room, rolling his dinosaur across the soft green carpet. The kitchen was alive with the scent of warm oatmeal as Mummy Pig stirred a pot in her blue apron. Peppa flipped open her book to N and saw a nest with tiny eggs nestled in a tree. "N is for nest," she said, and George chirped, "G-R-R-R nest." Daddy Pig sat at the table, reading the morning paper, his round glasses glinting in the light. He looked up and said, "Let's explore more letters outside." Peppa grabbed her crayons and dashed to the garden, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. The garden buzzed with life butterflies, fluttered over the flowers, and the tall oak tree rustled in the breeze. Peppa turned to O and found an octopus with wiggly arms in the book. "O is for octopus," she shouted, wiggling her own arms like tentacles. Next, the family wandered to the shed near the house, where old tools and a rusty tricycle sat quietly. Pepa opened P and saw a panda munching bamboo in a black and white picture. P is for panda, she said, and Mummy Pig smiled, picturing a panda in their yard. By noon, the sun blazed overhead, warming the grass and casting playful shadows around the wooden table. Pepa reached Q with a quilt patched in bright colors in the book. Q is for quilt, she cheered, and Daddy Pig pointed to the quilt on their picnic bench. In the afternoon, they played near the pond, where water lilies floated and a frog hopped onto a stone. Pepa flipped to R and saw a rabbit hopping through a field in the picture. R is for rabbit, she said, and George hopped around, giggling, G-R-R, rabbit. As dusk settled, the sky turned pink and purple, with stars just beginning to peek out over the hills. Pepa opened S and found a snake slithering through grass in the book. S is for snake, she declared, and George hissed, S, 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 S is G, R, R, R. That night, the family cozied up in the living room, the fireplace crackling and family photos glowing on the walls. Pepa reached T with a tiger prowling in the jungle in the picture. T is for tiger, she said proudly, and Mummy Pig roared softly in approval. Pepa slipped into bed, pulling her starry blanket up to her chin in the quiet, darkened room. She whispered, I'm so close to the end of the alphabet now. The moon beamed through the window, lighting her dreams of letters. Next morning, Peppa Pig woke up in her cheerful room, sunlight streaming onto the yellow walls and pictures. She hopped into her red dress and raced downstairs, clutching her alphabet book with determination. George was already in the living room, chasing his dinosaur across the green carpet. The kitchen smelled of fresh muffins, and Mummy Pig, in her blue apron, pulled a tray from the oven. Peppa opened her book to you and saw an umbrella standing in a rainy scene. U is for umbrella, she said, and George grabbed a tiny umbrella from his toy box. Daddy Pig lounged in his favorite chair, sipping coffee, his round glasses reflecting the morning light. He grinned and said, Let's finish the alphabet today. Peppa nodded eagerly and skipped outside to the garden, ready for the challenge. The garden glowed under the sun, with dew sparkling on the flowers and birds chirping in the tall oak tree. Peppa turned to V and found a violin with shiny strings in the book. V is for violin, she exclaimed, pretending to play an invisible one. Then the family strolled to the backyard fence, where vines climbed and a squirrel darted past with a nut. Peppa flipped to W and saw a whale swimming in deep blue water. W is for whale, she shouted, and Mummy Pig made a big splash sound for fun. By midday, the sun warmed the wooden table in the yard, and a light breeze danced through the leaves. Peppa reached X with an X-ray showing bones in the book. X is for X, she said, and Daddy Pig held up his hand, pretending to see through it. In the afternoon, they sat on the porch, where a rocking chair creaked and the view stretched to the hills. Peppa opened Y and saw a yellow yo-yo spinning in the picture. Y is for yo. She cheered, and George twirled his toy dino like a yo. As evening painted the sky gold, stars twinkled faintly above the cozy house with its red roof. Peppa turned to Z and found a zebra with black and white stripes. Z is for zebra, she declared, and George clapped, yelling G-R-R-R zebra. That night, the family gathered in the living room, the lamp casting a warm glow over their happy faces. Peppa closed her book and said, "I've learned the whole alphabet from A to Z." Mummy Pig hugged her, and Daddy Pig cheered. "You're a star." Peppa climbed into bed, snug under her starry blanket, the room dark and peaceful around her. She whispered, "I know every letter, now I'm ready for anything." The moon shone brightly outside, and the stars celebrated her success.